What HR tells you about why you didn't get the job is almost never the real reason. Today we're pulling back the curtain on what HR will never actually say about why they reject you, the real reasons that never make it into those polite rejection emails. Let's get into it. They've already decided who they're hiring. Let's start with the most frustrating one. Half the time the job was never really open. They already know who they're hiring. It's an internal candidate. It's someone's friend. It's the manager's former colleague from their last company. But legally or by company policy they have to post the job publicly and interview other candidates. So you spend hours tailoring your resume and preparing for an interview that was always just theater. You never had a chance because the decision was made before you even applied. This happens constantly, especially in government jobs and large corporations where posting requirements exist. HR will never tell you this. Instead you get, "We found a candidate whose experience more closely aligns with our needs." Translation: we were always going to hire Sarah from accounting, but we needed to make it look like a real search. The interviews were just checking boxes, going through the motions, making it look legitimate, and you were just a prop in that performance. Your time meant nothing to them. You're overqualified and they know it. Here's another one they won't say directly. You're too qualified and they're scared you'll leave. They see your resume with 10 years of experience applying for a mid-level role and they assume you're desperate, that you'll take this job and keep looking, that you'll bail the second something better comes along. And they're probably right, but instead of having that honest conversation they just reject you. The email says something vague about fit. What they mean is, "We don't want to train you just to watch you leave in 6 months." This is especially common when you're coming from a bigger company or a more senior role. They see that fancy logo on your resume and assume you'll be bored, that you'll think you're above the work, that you'll be a flight risk, so they pass on you and pick someone with less experience who they think will stick around. Even if you're genuinely interested, even if you'd be happy in that role, they've already decided you're temporary, and they're not willing to take that risk. You failed the vibe check. Let's talk about something HR absolutely will not admit. Sometimes you just didn't vibe with the interviewer. That's it. Your qualifications were fine. Your answers were solid, but something about your energy rubbed them the wrong way. Maybe you were too confident and they felt threatened. Maybe you were too nervous and they interpreted it as lack of capability. Maybe your sense of humor didn't land. Maybe you reminded them of someone they don't like. This is the gut feeling hire, and it happens way more than anyone wants to acknowledge. Because the truth is, hiring is subjective. People hire people they like, people they want to get lunch with, people who make them feel comfortable. If the hiring manager gets a weird feeling about you, even if they can't articulate why you're done, and they'll never tell you that. Instead you get, "We decided to go with a candidate who better fits our team culture," which is code for "We just didn't like you and we're not sure why. You're too expensive," without knowing it. Here's one that's particularly sneaky. Sometimes they reject you because they know you'll expect too much money even if salary hasn't been discussed yet. They see your experience level. They know what people with your background typically make, and they've already decided they can't afford you. But instead of having that conversation up front, they just ghost you or send a rejection. This is common when companies post jobs without salary ranges. They're fishing, seeing who applies, hoping to find someone senior who's willing to take a pay cut out of desperation. When you show up with the credentials they asked for, they panic, because now they'd actually have to pay market rate, and they don't want to. So they reject you and keep looking for someone just as qualified but somehow willing to work for less. The rejection email won't mention money. It'll be about experience or direction or some other vague corporate speak, but the real reason is budget. They just won't say it. Someone Googled you and didn't like what they found. Let's be real, everyone Googles candidates. HR Googles you, the hiring manager Googles you. Sometimes multiple people on the team Google you, and if they find something they don't like, you're done. Maybe it's your social media. Maybe you posted something political they disagreed with. Maybe your Instagram shows you partying too much. Maybe you tweeted something 5 years ago that someone found offensive. Maybe there's just nothing about you online and that makes them suspicious. You'll never know this is why you got rejected. They can't legally tell you "We didn't hire you because of your Twitter." So instead you get a generic rejection. But the truth is, someone saw something online that made them uncomfortable, and in their mind you became a risk, not worth the potential headache. This is why people say, keep your social media clean, because one photo, one tweet, one comment can cost you a job and you'll never even know know it happened. The job requirements were fake. Here's something that'll make you angry. Sometimes the job description listed requirements that weren't actually required. They said 5 years experience, but they hired someone with 2. They said master's degree preferred, but they hired someone with a bachelor's. They said proficiency in 6 different software programs, but the person they hired only knows 3. The requirements were aspirational, a wish list, not actual deal breakers, but you didn't know that. So when you didn't meet every single requirement, you didn't apply, or you applied and got rejected and assumed it was because you weren't qualified enough. Meanwhile, they hired someone less qualified. Why? Because that person knew someone, because that person was cheaper, because that person interviewed better. The requirements were never the point. They were just window dressing. And HR will never tell you that. They'll let you think you weren't good enough when really the whole thing was arbitrary. They're waiting for someone better. Sometimes you're good, you're just not great. And they want great, so they reject you and keep looking. They might interview 50 people hoping someone absolutely perfect walks through the door. Someone who checks every box. Someone who wows them. Someone who makes the decision easy. You were fine, maybe even good, but fine doesn't cut it when they think they can do better. This happens a lot in competitive markets. When companies know they have options, they get picky. They'll pass on solid candidates waiting for the unicorn. The rejection email will say something like, "We had many qualified candidates," which is technically true, but what they mean is, "You were qualified, but we think we can find someone more qualified, so we're going to keep looking." Even if it takes months, even if the role stays open, they'd rather wait than settle. You gave the wrong answer to a test question. Here's one that's particularly unfair. Sometimes interviewers have specific questions they're looking for specific answers to, and if you don't give that exact answer, you fail. Even if your answer is also valid, even if your answer might actually be better, they've decided there's one right way to do things, and if you don't say it their way, you're wrong. This happens with behavioral questions all the time. They ask about handling conflict. They want to hear collaboration and communication. If you talk about standing your ground and being direct, even if that's sometimes the right approach, you fail. They ask about leadership. They want to hear servant leadership and team empowerment. If you talk about making tough decisions and holding people accountable, you fail. There's a script in their head, and if you don't follow it, you're out. They'll never tell you this. The rejection will be vague, but the real reason is you didn't parrot back what they wanted to hear. The hiring manager changed their mind. Sometimes you're rejected for the simplest reason of all. Someone changed their mind. The hiring manager decided they don't actually need to fill this role right now, or they decided they want someone with different experience, or they decided to restructure the team, or they got cold feet about bringing someone new on. The role you applied for doesn't exist anymore, at least not in the way it did when you applied. But instead of telling you that and being honest, they just reject you because explaining what happened would be messy, would require transparency, would make them look disorganized. So they send the generic email and move on, and you're left thinking you did something wrong when really they just changed direction. This happens more than you'd think, especially in startups and companies going through transitions. The job you interviewed for isn't the job they're hiring for anymore, but you'll never know that. They hired internally and didn't want to. Here's a political one. Sometimes they're forced to hire an internal candidate they don't really want, because HR pushed it, because the internal person complained, because leadership said so, but they needed to interview external candidates to make it look fair, to give the internal person some competition, to justify the decision. You were never going to get it, but they needed you there to make the process look legitimate. The rejection email won't say, "We were told to hire this person." It'll say the selected candidate had specific experience, which is technically true. They had specific experience being already employed there.